Stream. Das heißt, das ist hier alles noch inoffiziell. Und wenn es dann richtig losgeht, werde ich auf Englisch switchen. Ich hoffe, das versteht jeder. Erstmal super, vielen Dank, Florian, dass du uns eingeladen hast. Wir sind ja sonst in Berlin. Wir machen seit 5 Jahren diesen TouchDesigner Roundtable. Das ist ein Meeting der, wie der Name schon sagt, TouchDesigner Community. Und das ist unser erster Ausflug aus Berlin heraus. Wir sind ganz aufgeregt und freuen uns, dass ihr so zahlreich gekommen seid, um teilzunehmen und zu zeigen, dass die TouchDesigner-Community oder die Leute, die vielleicht sich einfach dafür interessieren, sich nicht alle in Berlin versammelt haben, sondern auch noch in anderen Landesteilen zahlreich vorhanden sind. Ja, okay. Are we? Okay. Well, welcome to the TouchDesigner Roundtable Halle, because this time we've been invited from our friends at the Burg Giebichenstein Design High School in Halle, a town about 2 hours away from Berlin, 1.5 hours, yeah, if you're fast. And we have a beautiful lineup of speakers, spearheaded by Florian KÜHNLE, who's a professor here for make sure. Design fundamentals, process and interaction. And he's also, part of his teachings involves TouchDesigner. In the entrance hall, there's a nice exhibition with different works that students from here and also Mitarbeiter have created. We're going to hear from Viktoria Michailova, who is doing her master's thesis in Weimar, which I feel very warm about because I've been teaching there for a long time. And now I have a blackout. Norman Wasmuth, yeah, who's a regular at the TouchDesigner Roundtables in Berlin, and we've always been curious what Norman actually does. I also have to thank Christian Gohlke, who's running the tech setup, and this is also the point where we have to give a warm shout out to Wieland Hilker, who is usually taking care of the stream and is one of the founders of the TouchDesigner Roundtable. Maybe I should also mention that we are called the Node Institute. You can find us online under thenodeinstitute.org, and we organize an extensive education program in TouchDesigner, V4, and a couple of other softwares that we venture into. And if you feel unsatisfied with what your universities offer, then you will find that we continue what you've started here with many courses led by instructors from all over the world who are all specialists in what they do. So please check it out. And now I'm very happy to welcome Florian KÜHNLE, who's also been a regular guest of the TouchDesigner Roundtables. And he's going to talk a bit about what they do here in Halle, and also, of course, how TouchDesigner plays into their game. Welcome, Florian. Thanks you for having us.
Thanks. I think I will use that. All right. So, can you hear me? Yes. All right. Okay. Thank you, Stefan, for the opening and the kind words. And thanks for being here with the roundtable. First trip abroad. So. My name is Florian KÜHNLE. I'm happy to have the opportunity to open this roundtable and make the connection between the TouchDesigner scene and the Burg. Thank you, Stefan and Harshini, for embracing this idea. And yeah, more thank yous at the end. So, my topic is on the screen in 1 second. Here it is. So, it's called, or the topic of my talk is perpetual beta. Both words are here explained shortly. And the subtitle is, why is a half-finished patch a great thing? This is what I want to speak about today. Maybe it's a bit poignant and generalized, but I will sketch it out in the talk. So, I'd like to speak about something that I find fascinating. Oops. Okay, now again. I would like to speak about something that fascinated me long with softwares like TouchDesigner and which is embedded in this real-time softwares. And I think it makes sense to include it in design education or design foundation. It's the idea that what you work on is never really finished, that it always stays in a state where everything can be changed again, that there is not really a separation between the process and the result. The timeline part of the TouchDesigner interface already says it all. It goes on forever. It always, when it's at the end, it jumps to the beginning. There is not really an end or beginning. It's just one ongoing process. And for me, this idea of something being unfinished brings together two interests of mine. One is experimenting with technology and using it for discovery. And the other one is live performance or live improvisation as you would have it in theater or music or on stages. To explain that, I will reach a bit back into my past and attention web images, stock images. So I think this idea that technology can be a creative material or medium started for me with that, Lego. So you always start with basic building blocks, a granular level, and then you invent something bigger. You start building it, and while you build, your idea changes again, and you have this open process of going somewhere, but then you take turns, and in the end, something else comes out. And in the very end, when it's finished, you never really play with it, but you take it apart and start again. So, next old image. This is not from the web. This is a personal image. That is me there on the right, playing Tommy in a Pippi Langstrumpf piece. I think I'm around 8 or 9. And I spent a lot of my childhood and later teenage time in this amateur theater. It still exists today. It's a community project with hundreds of people finding a task there. Whatever you can do, you will have you can spend time there and find a meaningful task. So that means I show this here because I kind of have a background in theater, and performing on stage is like the software I speak about today is very, very real time. So when you forget your line or you have the wrong prop and you're suddenly like, oh, where's my thing? Then you can't stop performing. You have to still be Tommy. You can't stop, like say, okay, break, I'm gonna get my text. So you have to go on, you have to be in real time. You have to improvise if you forget your text, and you need to see where do I and the fellow actors come out at the end. It's exciting, and once you've managed it, you're like happy and relieved and etc. Then, more interesting photos. So from the theater and the acting, I at some point went to the backstage theater doing sound stuff as a teenager, and from that I went into film school and studied sound engineering. So some of these images, with the many hair, that's also me, somewhere there. So I spent a lot of time in dark rooms and on film sets, again at the intersection of technology, cables, devices, mixing desks, blah, 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 and the creative parts of that, musicians, working on the sound, etc. I like this intersection of dealing with technological things and creative things at the same time. And for me, somehow, explaining that to myself, this is a continuation into something like programs like TouchDesigner. Then again, at the end of the film school, I realized I like it more when also the audience has a performative part. So when there's a possibility for interaction. That's not so much the case in film or in television. It's more a passive thing for the audience. So that took me to art school, where the projects allowed for more interaction. Also, it was my first steps into programming, because everybody in the class that I went into was already programming. I wasn't, so I hurried to learn that. I tried to program works that would invent words which are not in the dictionary yet, or software that would imagine what is outside of a given image, or software that would create photographs with a perspective that is not available to the human eye. With some of the ideas, or maybe a lot of the ideas, I only partially got to where I wanted to get originally. I couldn't program well enough, the software didn't have the features, or it just took too long. So some of the things were not as finished as I wanted them to be. Today they could maybe be realized faster and easier, and some of the ideas that were fascinating to me then, that they have just become a Photoshop tool. So after university, I went to work in agencies and in freelance projects in the field, and some of it was closer to what I'm interested in and some was less. And often it was difficult to meet the creative ideas, the client's ideas, and the monetary budget in one point. Some projects were interesting though. For example, this was an installation for a car company, obviously, with light and projections and mirrors and a huge a disco ball and stuff like that, where internet users could drive a small camera car through the whole installation and look at the different stations. So that was very much down my alley. Then I started to teach in an English master's program in Berlin called Media Spaces. Some of the things on the right top and the bottom left are from that. Together with students, I discussed concepts, I worked on their ideas or helped them program, set up exhibitions and performances with them, etc. Some of the exhibitions reached quite an audience, so a couple of hundred people maybe, but they still keep an experimental edge, for example, top right. And I think this experimental edge is necessary to allow to try out your own ideas on your own terms, to find an individual way to get to result without feeling too much expectations from a final form that you're heading for. There needs to be a phase of being unfinished, that's my claim today, to allow for discovery. To keep it short, from there on I went through different projects, different universities as well, working on, thinking about, or trying out ideas on my own with collaborators or together with students. So there's some teaching, some student projects, some experiments up there, which will maybe you recognize what I do there in a later project, here in the keynote, etc. I'd like to jump into 3 projects a bit longer for now, because they all are related for me to this open process, to a sort of discovery, and to live performance. So these things I find fascinating in real-time software. The first work is called Publitographics. The name consists of public, because it took place in public and it involved the public, and lithographics, which is the method of printing with etched stone, if I described that correctly. It's from 2017 and took place in a light festival. It was an interactive video mapping, which you can already guess here from the glowing stones. And each stone of that city wall was turned into one single colored pixel. Around 200 years before today, this wall separated the upper and more private levels of the city of Luxembourg from the lower levels, a kind of privacy barrier. In the projection mapping, visitors could go to a photo booth, could record a short video loop of themselves, like Be Real today, I guess. Yeah. And then that clip was instantly projected onto the wall. So in a way, they could publish themselves or their selfie into the city space. This was intended to connect the topics of privacy and access, both in today's social media, so Be Real, web, selfies, Instagram, and in the historic site, which was also about privacy from one area to the other. As the expert can see, I was working with V4 back then. But it's a Node Institute event, so I know I'm joking. I don't see a lot of difference concerning what I find good about it. So, how is this related to live performance and discovery? One thing is that people could record live these video loops and instantly see them on the wall. They waved, made faces, did stuff in front of the camera. Basically, they performed a small theatrical act for the camera. Another live aspect is on my side, since the whole work depended on people taking part every night. I wasn't really sure before the first night if it would work. I didn't know if the people would record loops or if they were like, I don't know, I don't understand. So that had a certain exciting aspect. Then in a technological sense, and you can see it here, it's very much running in real time. It's very live action or live video. And yes, I had a backup system with pre-recorded material, but that would have been quite different. And you can see in terms of open process, I would say, from my patch, which looks, I mean, it's different probably, but I think it looks a bit chaotic. So it grew to this point from beginning till then when the project was happening. It's in a kind of organic state. There's no central interface that I was operating on. There's buttons everywhere, etc. So for me, it's it's not a ready state. It's in some state. It worked very well the 3 nights, but it's version 70 of 70. Could be different the next day. Another project is called Prisma, which was as well an interactive video installation realized together with my friend Prokop Bartonicek. 2 projectors projected images on 2 mirrors. The mirrors were hanging like a mobile, and they could be moved by the visitors freely around the room. So you could push them or turn them or rotate them. The idea was to turn the whole room into a kind of prismatic environment where projected images and reflections, the visitors' reflections and their shadows, etc., would become one unclear mix of imagery and copies of imagery. The idea behind it was that we are all in a kind of prismatic view. We have so many information and images coming across through social media that it's harder for us to decide what to look at, what is relevant and what not. When visitors, so there's actually no visitors here, but you can imagine, when visitors move one of the mirrors, the whole imagery in the room changes, the projections change. When somebody pushes one mirror, the other mirror unavoidably moves as well. So to explain what this again has to do with improvisation and discovery, I need to speak a bit about how the project came into being. In the beginning, the idea of my co-collaborator and me was very open. We knew we wanted to do something with the HTC Vive, which was kind of in a hype then, but we wanted to do something that would use the technology in a wrong way or in a stupid way, maybe in an inappropriate way. So what we decided first in the beginning, kind of as a joke, was that we would put the VR glasses on a shelf very, very high up in the corner of the room so that nobody could ever use it because it's too far to reach, and use only the handheld tracking controllers. And in the end, through long trials and ideas, etc., it went into the idea of this mobile. Through the 2 trackers, there's one attached to each of the mirrors. We could have a kind of a virtual twin in the software of the mobile. You can see it from time to time here in V4. And this allowed us to control the projection mapping in a way that it would only hit. So here are the 2 mirrors in V4. So we could allow the projection to hit only the mirror and not the wall behind the mirror, and independently of where it was moved. So, third project, last project, is also strongly connected to live performance and discovery, but less in a technological sense or in a programming sense. As a team together with Clara Pons, Cynthia Hasbani, and Christina Niffeler, we created a scenography, which you can see here, for a concert performance of the piece Aventure, et Nouvelle Aventure by György Ligeti. It's a modern classical music piece for 3 singers and a chamber ensemble. And it revolves or it deals with how the vocal utterance, so basically the voice of humans, developed. You will maybe hear a short, not too loud snippet in a second. It's a rather abstract piece with a lot of noises and dissonant chords and unusual ways of singing, screaming, or speaking. So it's a piece that might not be so easy to every listener. But the idea was that the whole performance would be primarily to elementary school children, so children between 6 and 12. And of course, they are not very good at sitting for 40 minutes listening to a piece of abstract music. So the idea was then, let me check if this is the part with sound, yes. I will let you hear a bit of it. Down? No, I can't. Good. All right. So you can imagine that 10-year-old kids would not be listening calmly to this for long, but it's a great piece. So what we did in this kind of concert installation, we decided that musicians and the audience would all mix in the room, spread out, and could move freely. They can discover the whole setting that consists out of projections and lights and architectural elements and small kinetic elements, and they can discover it by themselves. Some parts of the scenography were hard, some were soft, some were like a skin, some were like related to the eye or to the vocal cords, because it was all connected to how the voice is produced and how the human body produces sounds through voice. The open space allowed for the young listeners to walk around, to explore. They could touch things, they could imitate the directress, they could stand next to her and play directress as well. They could go close to the singers and players, etc. They could lay down on a furry area, they could just watch the projections. But they were free to discover the installation and by discovering the installation also the musical piece. Another aspect of improvisation in this project is before the performance, when you set up. So when you design for a theater space or a live performance, it is quite common that you prepare your ideas and models and concepts, but when you get to the real location and you set up, not everything works as expected. So it's quite common that you have to improvise with ideas, with technology, with the things you need once you are in the location. So something might not be available, or somebody might be sick, or there's a new rule that forbids something, or there was the problem, one of the ventilators below the Lametta chair, one was too loud, one was too weak. So you run into problems that you can't prepare for. So this means there also you will have to improvise. You have to find a new way to realize what you want to express. So I'll get back to the question I posed in the beginning. I spoke a lot about now improvisation, unfinished things. You have to change things. You have to be open to changing things on the go. What is the difference between a state of unfinishedness and a result? What is the difference between process and final result? So the question is, why is a half-finished patch a great thing in terms of programming, for example, with TouchDesigner? And how is it relevant for education, design education, and why is it that TouchDesigner, for example, is a good tool to deal with that whole thing? So when you start a project, it's quite common, I think, to start with an explorative phase, an exploration of what already exists. You draw sketches, you build prototypes, you collect research, etc. The idea is to keep things open and flexible and being able to change things quickly. Then, and that's what I think, I don't know if you agree or not, on the other hand, today there's a lot of advice how to learn, what to learn, what to look into, what is the best tool, what is the best AI thing you shouldn't miss. And of course, it's good to have the possibility to learn and to use tutorials and to finish something in short time. But what I think it's just as important to move around in the area where things are unfinished, where they still change, where you doodle, discover, and make a detour, as it's written here, 3Ds. So especially when you use technological tools, I think. With programming and digital workflows, it's to keep things open and flexible is maybe sometimes a bit hard. You need a certain level of skill to be able to change things fast or be spontaneous. Also, you all the time or often you jump back and forth between result and process. So in linear video editing or when you do 3D modeling and then you render, you always jump back and forth between this is how it looks in the end, and now I'm going back to modeling. I'm going back to modeling. So why is it a back? Why is it like forward and backwards? When you work in real-time software like Touch or Before or Cables or whatever, it's different. You always stay in a kind of unfinished stage, I would say. It's an in-between state. There is no clear difference between the stage of working or editing and the stage of exporting, rendering, putting out a finished thing, compiling. You don't change back and forth between those two stages. You add and connect nodes and you remove and you change. And in theory, you could do that forever. It's with Lego. You build and underway while you build, your idea changes and you start to build in another direction. And of course, all digital softwares can do this today, a certain forward, backward. You have layers, you have undo, you have redo, you can save different versions of something, so you can go back with digital things. But it's a very linear movement. You can go forwards or backwards, that's it. You don't have the option to intervene at any point given, earlier or later. It's not a field that you can change things. You can go this linear way, backwards, forwards. And you can see this also when you look at the interfaces of the software. What is at the center of attention? So, for example, Photoshop and After Effects, they are very focused on the result. So on the video that will be here or on the photo, the image that will be there. The frame with the final image or final video is in the center and it's very large in this software's interface. The methods and processes that you can use are hidden in the menus or in the panes. So the final result that will come once you have finished is at the center of attention. It tells you, here will be your result once you're finished. It's waiting for you to finish what you're about to start. I think in visual programming, like TouchDesigner Before, and that's actually a blank sheet of paper in case anybody wonders what that software is, it's the other way around. It's not the result that is at the center, but it's the process that is at the center. This is where the things happen, and it's more clear in Before, Beta. I don't know how Gamma looks. It's more clear here. There will be your process once you start, and of course on the paper as well. In the beginning, you also haven't done anything, but what you're focusing on is the process and not the result, how it will be at some point. You start with a rather empty patch. that is full of potential, if you want. You put things together without having a very that clear goal or that clear route. One node leads to the next one, and you always have to decide what to do in the next with the next step. And I think this naturally, by itself, already leads to exploration, to changing, to thinking in variants, to using detours, like I said. Not knowing becomes the motor for variety. It's like watching the Polaroid, maybe. You know there is something there, but how exactly it will come out, you will only see with time. So, discovery and learning on your own terms and your own speed is something I think we should take care to train and practice and cultivate. The technology around us, computers and smartphones and softwares and the internet, they become easier and easier. Everything becomes very frictionless, superficially. I don't need to know how it works. I just finger touch and it works. Suddenly the image is retouched and the device is like a slice of bread, as big as a slice of bread. On one hand, that's of course great. It enables us a lot. It helps us with daily tasks. It's great. But also it puts us further away from understanding how to make things work on our own terms. We basically become users of closed, glossy boxes that we depend on. Yeah, let's talk about that later. The know-how, so the knowing of how things actually work, is kept private by, well, tech corporations. The do-it-yourself movement and open source movements in the 2000s had the idea that everybody should be able to use technology and learn about it freely. Today, I sometimes think it feels more like everybody should use technology in all aspects of life and not understand how things work. But I think as designers, we should know, we should not only know how to use the tools, but we should, to some extent, be able to change the tools. It's not always necessary, it's not always efficient, but sometimes it might be. I think as everybody, but also as designers, we should not completely rely on algorithmically curated lists of video tutorials that are being recommended through social media channels to tell me how and what to learn. As an alternative, I would say, I think it's worth to strike a balance between the two things, to strike a balance between having things solved for me, explained by tutorials, or taken out of my hands, and the more exhausting, slower, probably more sustainable route of dealing with the learning myself. And for me, it goes back also to the aspect of enjoying to perform something, as I started with theater and performing on stage. It's exciting. You might forget your text. You might make the wrong moves. But something new can also appear. And once you have finished, you have mastered your excitement. I wrote here, less meta, more beta. So I'm going to switch over for the finish to what happens in the classes here. And the first year with the students, next slide. All students from all study programs are mixed in interdisciplinary groups. And in the first semester, the main focus is on approaching aspects of working with parameters, like parametric design, in a rather manual and low-tech way. So in the first semester, one assignment is to work with everyday objects and use them as a material to understand what are parameters, what is designing with parameters. What later will be sliders, numbers, dials. What we do for that in the class is we try to work with parameters slow and intentional. The students use everyday objects to create a visual metaphor for a certain word. So last slide were an example of these words. And they try to work with those everyday objects using the written parameter. It has to be in a gradual way, so you see there's always several images, 5 or 6, and they use the parameter from minimum to maximum, and they try to depict it through these images of everyday objects. In the next step, the process opens up to a kind of low-tech media technology that is used in this parametric way. It's a slightly oldish, I mean, I'm not 20, it's a slightly oldish sense of media technologies, so it's like long exposure photography, flatbed scanners, slit scan, collages with paper and screen, light and color, video feedback loops, putting the display under the microscope or stuff like this. The main intention is here that people first discover possibilities by moving back and forth between analog and digital media. And then after experimentation, they kind of find one thing and they use it systematically again to make a gradual, to use it as a parameter. This open finding process is very important. In the beginning, the experimentation phase, that's important. Then later in the second semester, the focus shifts to maybe a bit more advanced engagement with digital media and technology and how we as analog beings engage with it. Probably analog, I don't know, it's mixing up. The examples are from an assignment about augmenting displays. So smartphones, tablets can be augmented over the border of the display and outside of the frame or the other way around. From there on, it moves to assignments that look at the relation between the human body and the digital sphere, let's say. And this is where we start, you can guess, using TouchDesigner. So human-computer interaction, as it used to be called, still is called, I'm not sure, has become such a common aspect in our daily life. Our smart devices can sense all these things, whether we awake or asleep, whether we move, our heart rate, etc., etc. So our devices know a lot of, they collect, or they're able to collect a lot of data. Also, the human body today is more relevant in digital design in general. So if you think about motion capture or digital lip sync for avatars or virtual production or sculpting in VR. So in this exercise, it's called data design display, or another round, maybe data display design, I don't remember. Students look into the topic of data coming into from the body to the virtual realm, if you want, and how there can be a meaningful interaction. These are often very simple translations from physical to digital, but this is exactly what I think makes sense to understand it at a basic level. So in 5 days, they use the ZigSim app. You could see it there, and the sensors in the smartphone and TouchDesigner to somehow make a relation between a physical gesture or a sound or a bodily activity and a digital reaction on a screen. Again, all these principles are quite all around us every day. Nothing exciting, I would say, but in class, the students have to find their own approach and own idea. And of course, it's a challenge to do this in 5 days, learning TouchDesigner and realizing a prototype. So, to make this possible, that people can quickly arrive at a point where they can experiment well, we use a lot of, we use a mirror board with the basic functionality that's necessary, so everybody can quickly and on their own find the right paper, which is currently having the text to read. Everybody can try to look for a solution anytime and self-oriented. That was the line. Then we also use a lot of prepared small patches, really like compact patches that already take the data from the ZigSim into the patch and do something basic with it. And you can use these simple starting spots and start to modify and change it to quickly get going. Also, there's then we have a repository of animation principles, for example, how to have transformations and loops and animations and transitions in principle. Still, it's a lot to learn. All right, That was the first year. Then, as outside of the first year, there's elective classes that are in the direction, changing topics, but they all also, or a lot of them deal also with the aspects of technology, discovery, experimentations. So, for example, on the left side, the workshop, in German it's Spuren von Veränderung, that would translate into traces of change. That is done by Tony Bayer, who's working with me here. And it dealt with using the behavior or the movement of hacked and broken devices, electronic devices, and how you can use them for drawing or creation of images. So again, technological, experimental, and then there will come something out of it. And you have to try out and find. The workshop on the right was by Schnelle bunte Bilder, and it addressed how movements of physical items or the body can be captured in analog or digital shapes or traces. Other workshops deal with time, space, and pixels, like on the left, or use materials from the material library, which is here on the campus, to create images, create videos out of leather, plastics, cloth, stones, crystals, etc., with camera and light. Then there's a lot of things, but to round up, there's and to lead over to maybe what's outside, then there's workshops on interactive posters or interactive exhibits, where also the body of the visitor is kind of triggering things. I mean, you probably know all about this. So you see, it's also not only me, it's a team effort, and different people doing different classes revolving around the topics. All right, I think it's already late, no? Yes, okay. But we did start a bit later. Anyway, I hope you could take some interesting thoughts out of this talk about this perpetual beta idea. I think open processes and experimentation with technology is important for us. And yes, it's practical to use and fast to use devices and softwares that take work off our shoulders and off our hands. But I think it's important to keep a balance between using automated processes and training your own skills and discovery. So that was Roundup Close. It's really incredible how short this feels once you're here. So then I will not speak much here, but I would like to thank the team from the Burg who supported in one way or the other. I would especially like to thank Tony because he put really a lot of work into this. I would like the students outside who were ready to join the pop-up exhibition. So what you see out there. There's some more info, but I'm also here for longer. Yes. Last official slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Florian, for this excellent talk. I really like it. I think there's some very important points, like the process is more important than the result. And I think also that we're bombarded with perfect results these days. And they're it's a distraction. It's a decoy. It's not good. And there's always a lot of money and also power behind this illusion of perfection. Yeah. And it kind of maybe also aims at kind of feeling us powerless and not empowering us in this kind of open situation, this not perfect surfaces, these things which only half work sometimes and so on. They show you that you can actually achieve something, that you're not only subject to all of this. Yep. Now, usually we would now have questions from the audience and so on, because Florian has talked so long. And I also must explain that now we try to have a long time between the talks, because this is not only about the talks and the people in front of here, it's all about you. And what we figured out is when there's like long and boring breaks where nobody stands in front and talks, then you guys start getting to know each other. Now you study together to a certain degree, but I'm sure there's a few strangers in the room. And so I would almost say, let's switch directly to that social part, which is short enough for everybody to grab a drink, maybe have a cigarette and get to know someone you don't know yet. And Maybe also I should say that Harshini is here with us. No, I can't see her. There she is, and she's also working with the Node Institute, and she's also a very good talking point if you want to talk with the Node Institute. I'm also very good to talk to. Florian is very good to talk to. I think we just skipped the audience questions, and we meet then again for the next talk by Victoria at 9. And please forgive us if we're a bit strict about the times, but we also have the stream audience, and we kind of assume that they, during our usually very long breaks, sit around and are bored. I'm really happy if then there's the next talk because they can't mingle with us. So that being said, I think it was a really great, inspiring talk. It reminded me why it pays off to go to art and design school, because it's really a privilege to approach things that way, and it's going away
and it's
later,
important also.
very quickly.
One thing about the break, maybe there's some amount of free drinks at the Consum, so don't go away. Go to Consum and say you're from the Roundtable, which I think anybody is at Consum now. And there's 100 free beers and 60 free lemonades. After that, you have to pay.
Okay, then go for it.
They're students. Okay, everyone. Hi. As we slowly transition back into the space, firstly, thank you, Florian, for having us, but also kickstarting our talks for today. I want to acknowledge someone else in the room, also, which is myself, actually, first, which is my name is Harshini. I'm the program manager for the Node Institute. So if you have any questions or just want to say hello, please come by. I try not to be scary, and please talk to me. I want to give also like a hello to Marcus Heckman, who's in the room. He's at the back. He's the technical director for Derivative. So the gods that be that make TouchDesigner, that's Derivative. So Marcus, super happy that you're here to join us for our first roundtable in Halle. And so now we're going to start our next speaker. Our next talk is with Victoria Mikhailova. With Victoria, we know each other for a little while now, and you actually spoke.
Almost a year.
Almost a year. Oh, happy anniversary. Victoria started her career as a VJ, working firstly with Hydra, another live coding software. She's currently working on her thesis project, which involves devising a full dome experience, which deals with trauma and emotional responses. So I'm really excited that you can join us in Halle for your first ever roundtable talk. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Harshini, and also actually, thank you, Harshini, for offering my candidature to Stefan, who then kindly invited me to this roundtable, and it was and it is a great pleasure for me, and very. I feel very nervous, but it's okay. We will work with that. So, hello, my name is Victoria Mikhailova. And I will talk about my master thesis in progress today. It's not yet finished, but it's hopefully will be presented and performed in March. And a little bit about me. So I, as Harshini already mentioned, I'm a VJ and also a media artist. So now I'm finishing my studies at Bauhaus University. Before that, I also were in HFG Karlsruhe. And in my past, I also have a bachelor in sociology. And I studied and worked in graphic design for several years, which also helped me greatly with working with visuals now. And it helps to, I don't know, see composition better and just even work with my social media. So I also added my Instagram here, just in case. Yes, since we are now on who I am part, it might also explain a bit better who I am. I'm better for now in social media online rather than speaking live, but I work on that also now. So I create visuals in different kinds of media, in VR, in 3D. My main tool still remains live coding with Hydra, which is an online-based live coding environment based on JavaScript. For example, the visuals on the right, on the left, basically also this one, and in the corner with my face with black things were all created there. And I still use it as my tool to draft visuals or actually to VJ perform. But today we will focus on another thing, which is this project. So we will get to this one. It uses TouchDesigner mainly, so this is why I'm here as well. Getting to this project, which is called Heal. I don't know yet how to call it more poetically or beautifully. So It has just a HALLE name for now. And I would like to ask you now, what does healing look like to you, or how do you imagine healing as a process? How does it happen? In which circumstances? Yeah, if someone wants to answer, it would be great. I wanted to make some interactive part here, but if everyone is shy, I can go on. I don't see any hands, so we can move on. So for me personally, healing is a process where, for example, you sit, or like how I would imagine it. Usually, it's a process where you sit with a psychologist in a room and you discuss your traumas or your issues, everyday problems, and then you work in this interaction and you see how you can overcome them or move forward. Or also healing or moving on can happen just when life happens and you find out new ways how to react to some experiences in your life. So you just learn with time. But during last year, I learned that actually creating art can help me greatly in that. And maybe it's not a big discovery, because I think that most of the artists, even not, if not all, still somehow process their anxieties, their pains in their art. But for me, it was an actual insight, and I want to tell about this discovery to you. So it all started in December 2023. I was feeling really low, lost and lonely. I also lived on my own, which might be the reason. But yeah, it was a very bad evening. And I was working on one project for a client. And after that, I just decided to create something on my own. It was not even, the aim was not even for creating. I just wanted to distract myself from all the anxieties and bad ideas or thoughts I had. So I opened Hydra, which I mentioned at the beginning. And step by step, without any plan, it turned into this visual. There should be a little bit of sound, but it doesn't really matter because it was not my sound. It was from Earth Eater, because I like listening to her. Is there sound? I don't know. It's okay. Yeah. It's just for the background. So when I came up with this visual, I was first really happy because I like when something aesthetically beautiful or appealing happens, but this was not the main focus, because also I enjoyed just interacting with it. And it created a kind of a feedback loop in reality, because first I wasn't crying like you see here. So I wasn't crying, it was just a deep, hard feeling inside of me. But I gave a form to it outside, so to say, unintentionally and kind of subconsciously. And when I saw it, I started just playing with it. I stopped updating the code for the visual, and it kind of mirrored my own feeling. And then I mirrored it backwards, because while seeing this kind of black tears on the screen, I started crying, as if mirroring it in return. And after, I don't know, some time of just playing with it, and also a session of crying, I felt really relieved. And the thoughts that I had prior to this session really did not feel that heavy anymore. They did not vanish, but they felt at least manageable. And after this session, I felt that it is an interesting point to look into and to explore, to see how generative visuals or generating visuals can help me process anxieties, pains, and also traumas that I have. I also posted about it on Instagram, and it always is interesting for me to see what feedback from people my works can get. It wasn't the goal on its own, but it's still interesting to research what people, how people react. And it was also beautiful to have some people really heartfully supporting me. So this also reassured me that I can and should move on with this. So after that first session, sometime later, I came to, I wanted to look into the trauma that I have. So I used to work with a mentor, psychologist, since 2021, I think. And since, like, at the beginning of our work, we already defined or dug up the trauma from my childhood, which wasn't very, so I did not forget it, and it was really in my memory quite vividly, but I didn't know how it actually affected my reality now. So thanks to the psychologist, we understood it. So the trauma was that in my childhood, before primary school, so before even elementary school, at the age of about 3 or 4, my parents were sending me to a summer camp for children to stay there for 5 days overnights, and then come back home for the weekend. And it was repeating for about 2 months in summer, which for me was a very stressful experience because I was very little. I missed my mom very much, and I felt abandoned, ignored, because my parents never agreed to not send me there. And it was really hurtful. For my parents, it was just a practical decision because they needed to work and they couldn't leave me anywhere because kindergarten was closed for the summers. So it was a repeating process, hurting me greatly. And with the psychologist, we understood that it actually affected my reality now, my behavior in a way that, for example, the strongest example here is that I choose unavailable partners romantically, and it can be in different ways, like they just live somewhere far, or they are emotionally unavailable, or they are already in a relationship, or they just don't care about me. And I do it, it's not their fault, it's my subconscious choice of such partners, because this way I replay the feeling of longing and missing my mother in that kindergarten. And now that I understand it, it's easier to move forward these patterns. but I wanted to look into this pain and process it and give it shape and form outside of me. So with this visual, when I will play it, there is also sound. And so for this piece, I was making sound and visual separately and then put them together, but both were created when I was specifically thinking how I felt in that summer camp, and especially when my parents were sitting with me in the bus before it was going to this camp, because I was the only child crying there, and the whole bus was waiting until I come down at least a bit. And for the sound, there was also the moment at night when I used to have bad dreams in my childhood, and I woke up at night thinking that I was at home. I cried out for my mom, and she wasn't there. And when I opened my eyes, there was this huge hall of like 30 beds with kids in the darkness, and I felt really lonely, and there was only Nanny in the corner saying like, go back to sleep. And it felt really hurtful because at that moment I felt really on my own when I was like 3, and there was no one to come, and it felt, you can imagine, bad. So I was remembering this while recording my voice for this sound piece. And I was also crying out for my mom there. So we can watch this piece. If it gets too loud, let's control it. But it's okay. About the visual, you might have noticed that it has block tracking, which all of us know this year, thanks to Captain Panic. So I was actually, I'm not, well, like, I would say I'm still beginning TouchDesigner. So with TouchDesigner, I cannot really improvise, but I learn and take some tools from tutorials primarily, and then I adapt them to my goal. So in this case, I looked through and I learned the tutorial on block tracking, but then I recorded this video of myself, and I just wanted to see how it will look like applied into that patch. And then, after time, I actually felt more clearly why I liked the outcome. I will get to it later. And with sound, I also was going through the tutorial on granular synthesis. And so it's like, on one hand, it's learning new tool, so practical things for me professionally to grow. And on the other hand, I always adapted to what I want to explore or what I want to express. And see, I'm open to whatever comes out of it. So when I posted, again, I'm really active on Instagram, so I was posting about it. And I told the whole story like I told you. And it got even stronger response, which really touched me and again reassured me that this is something that I should look into, because people felt related. Not always, there were even stories of people who said that they had the same experience with like feeling abandoned, while my parents, don't get me wrong, they really love me, and I'm very, very lucky with my family, But that particular thing was not their fault. They really needed somewhere to send me. Still, it hurt me greatly. And there were people who also had the same experience, and it was interesting for them to see someone talk openly about that or through art. I also asked people how they felt after watching that video that I showed, and many, like some said that they felt stress or anxiety, or there was a very poetic comparison with inner glass cutting a bit inside. But there were also people who felt empowered by it because I was speaking openly about like my past and my trauma, and like how I find ways to process it. So it was a way for them, an inspiration for them to like feel seen in a way. Yes, and then I just while preparing the presentation, like for my professors, also for Stefan, I was, yeah, Stefan is my second supervisor, by the way. I don't remember if I mentioned. So I was preparing the presentation, and I wanted to have the screenshots from that video, and I put them into Crea AI just to have a higher resolution, because at this moment I was working with like free version of TouchDesigner. And while I put the screenshots from this video into Crea AI, it gave a very interesting effect because it started naturalizing back the glitched image. So we started getting some bodily deformations, which I personally loved. And I started putting more of these screenshots. So this one already on its own feels very weird and bodily. And thanks to Time Machine in TouchDesigner and like just cache of interpolation of different frames from the video. And Crea started creating some like actual injuries, like in the right upper corner, for example. They look very disgusting, and this is what I actually loved. This one is really great. And what I actually understood today while preparing for the presentation, what I love here is I knew, and I will get to the conclusion here, but what I understood today is that these injuries look like scars, not just an injury that just happened, but a scar that already healed in a way. So it's like we're coming to that, wait. So we have a bit more. This is my favorite. This eye, I don't know, very, very disturbing. So when I created these images, a little bit of thinking brought me to the understanding that what I love here is that it's like illustrating psychological trauma through physical injury. So these deformations on my face show the deformations and pain of my soul within. And here, we get to this scars theme. So I like that these look like scars because time has passed and a lot of time, and the body already kind of lives with them and found a way to live with these scars without bleeding anymore. But they still look hurtful, like the trauma we all might have. Not only mine, but I tend to think that most of the childhoods have some traumas. And then I went on working with other, with live camera, because the previous video was still a pre-recorded one. And I wanted to work with the live video camera, because here in the very first piece, in this one, it has this performative part, because we have me interacting with the visual real time. So coming back, I applied live camera to different patches in TouchDesigner. All of these three are based on Panix tutorials. Actually, these two are from the same patch, but I just found different pieces. So this in the middle is the kind of end result of their tutorial, and this is somewhere at the beginning, and I really liked how, again, the body deforms here. And one more thing about this one, I actually would love to find a way, and I have to try it out with having it on live camera. It might be very hard on the computer to process live camera capture into AI to have this kind of imagery live. I haven't yet tried it. I assume it, I know the tutorial to try, but I haven't yet. We will see in March. Yeah, then I got to the dome because it has also practical and artistic decision. Practically, I just wanted to work with Miki Remen, who is a professor in Bauhaus, and I get along with him quite well. So I wanted him to be my professor, and he specializes on full dome. And since full dome now is getting more and more popular, I wanted to try this media while I'm still in the university, and I have a contact to Miki, who also has contact to Jena Planetarium. And fortunately, we also have a small dome in Bauhaus. Artistically, I wanted to interact with the screen in a live way, but I thought we discussed it with ChatGPT and came to the decision that dome can be more interesting because it gives this uniting effect of being all together in this space, because I wanted it to be healing not only for me, but also maybe to the people like those from the Instagram who were also relating to this psychological part of the project. So to get to the dome, I needed live camera, 360, to have the 360 projection. And it was a real journey, because first I tried it with just a webcam from the computer and then distorting it in TouchDesigner. It's a very DIY and bad decision. Then there was this camera, this very interesting device, which I found in rental of Bauhaus. It's a DIY lens connected of 3 lenses with a mirror on top of it. It's easier to work with because it doesn't have any delay if you connect it to any computer. So it was also fine on my old MacBook, but it has a lower quality. And I needed a big quality because we need it for the dome. So I switched to first Insta360, which is fine, but it doesn't give the live 360 signal into the computer. It's actually just for recording videos. But there I found a way. I found a person through YouTube tutorials. I found a developer who made his own program to actually get this signal in circles or in equirectangular format. And he was really helpful to work with it, even could fix some bugs for me personally, but at night it was really touching. And we were like, I just thanked him on Instagram when I found his tutorial, and then he was really like, he got in touch, and that's how we got to know each other, and he was really helpful debugging all the things in his program. But the bad thing in that program is that it's very hard on the computer and doesn't work on Mac. So the last and the current option is Ricoteta, which I got from my university, and it turned out to be way easier because it just gets the correct equirectangular format just through OBS without any extra programs. Way easier, very nice. And then you easily send it into, you don't even need OBS, yes, you just get it through MediaPipe into TouchDesigner directly. So it was a long journey to get just a simple decision, but you know, it sometimes happens like that. And then, yeah, there were trials where when I finally got the live signal from camera into TouchDesigner, I started applying the effects that we saw before. This one on the right is actually from that mirror lens, so it's lower in quality, way worse, but it was okay for some first tryouts. And the ones with laptop are from the this program of that guy. It's called CosmoViewer NG, but it looks and there I could get this like circle as well from one of the lenses of Insta360. These are some tryouts, the same videos just applied on Amateras, which is just a preview program. If you pay, you can also use it for actual mapping on DOM. But for me, I just needed to see how it might feel in the DOM. And why I also wanted DOM and this like camera, I just wanted to hug the DOM. So it feels kind of like that here. Yeah, some more tryouts, a bit laggy, but yeah. This one doesn't look like me anymore, it looks like MRI. But I also thought it would be an interesting touch in one of the scenes. And then I got to this dome I mentioned in Bauhaus. It's quite small, like maybe till this kind of a column, this circle, really tiny, but good for my work, and also just 20 minutes walk from my home. So it was a big luck for me to find it. And I also moved to, like, it was a coincidence that I moved. And turned out that this dome was the closest point ever to my new home. And then there were a lot of issues with this dome because the computer that runs visuals and sound is on Linux, and it's really not good. Fortunately, we have Carlos. I didn't have time to ask for his permission to add the photos, so Carlos, without a photo, is a very helpful student who is always with me in the dorm and spent about a month just getting visuals onto the dorm, and it feels like very waste of time, but it still had to happen because I needed it there. And I couldn't really help because I don't, like, they have other programs. It's not TouchDesigner or Resolume. They have Splash and some other thing. And the dome that they have there actually was for just running videos. So they never used it for live stream. So he had to create a way around it. From me, he also learned about NDI, so I just sent NDI signal from my TouchDesigner and also from Ableton Sound, streaming to his computer, and then he does his magic. I don't know what happens there. He tried to explain to me. It was really strange But if someone needs this kind of Linux management, you can reach out after this speech, and we will talk to Carlos. This is me, a little bit more of this DOM. It's just not my visuals, just some default stuff. Yeah, now it's my second home there. And finally, in around December, November, we got the visuals running onto the DOM, and I got to some tests to see how I actually feel while interacting with these visuals. And here I would especially pay attention to the left one, because I didn't expect it, but while just looking at it and interacting in a way, I was making also weird sounds there. Not crying like you might see there, but like quietly making weird sounds. So the visual encouraged me to interact in this way. And in all of these visuals, I just let myself feel how I want to move or what I want to do while I am inside of it. And with the left one, I really got into those memories, and there was a strong tense inside of my body that then got released at some time in this. It was not long, maybe 3-4 minutes. And the middle one was the most, it felt like flying, and also very hopeful. So not all of the visuals that I make are about pain or some hard feelings. There is also hope, and I want this live performance that I'm preparing to have this mixture, or like maybe linear development from chaotic and more hurtful emotions to hope at the end. And I really loved this one in the middle. The third one was just interesting to interact with. I don't know yet how I feel about it. So this is a part where I explore, and now I'm on the stage where I create more visuals and test them and see how I feel with them. So it's like never-ending circle, or like feedback, where I create something from my feelings and want to express them, but then they can also make me feel in return differently or better or worse. There is also sound, and sound for me turned out to be even easier to create. I create ambient, and it also gives this meditative and also healing effect. We can listen to this one. This one I will play now. It gave this feeling of unity with the universe. I made it at night, and I used to create such pieces also since like 2020, when I learned during COVID how to use Ableton. And I never put much significance to this skill, but only recently I understood that it actually really makes me, it calms me down, and it is this way of also processing some anxieties or pains I have. Let's listen. We can, maybe make a bit higher if possible. Okay, then we will not listen, but you will understand. We are finishing. This is the last, the next will be the last one. Yeah, so with this one you kind of understand the mood. And the last piece that I want to show, we will finish in 2 minutes. this one I created when I applied, after I applied to thesis, so actually registered, and felt really panicking. So instead of just panicking, I decided this is a source to use and make something from it, because it's about my thesis of processing difficult or unbearable emotions. And I created this sound we will hear now. And then I also decided to try to see how I will move to it. So will there be a sound? No, now will. Maybe it's too quiet. Yeah, it's too quiet, but it will get stronger. So there will be a stronger beat, and it caused me this, like, I started moving in this repetitive way. And at some point when the sound comes to the peak, I was also feeling this tension. And at the end, when the peak finished, I felt a great relief. So I understood that when I consciously approach creating sound, I can also process these emotions and actually get rid of them by putting them into this art. They are unfortunately not synced, but you understand. So when it was a peak there, I felt relieved. And it was a big discovery for me, because I understood that it's not just my coping mechanism, but it can be a healing process when I consciously approach this creation of sound and visual. And not only created unconsciously, but consciously think like how I can express my emotion. And then when I give this form, it does not bother me that much anymore. Yeah, this is it. I'm okay in time. I don't know how it should have been, but probably less. So thank you. I hope it might have inspired some thoughts in you. And if you want to take part in the rehearsals or live sessions in end of March or end of February or in March, DM me. It's Santa Bro, and I will let you know when it's ready.
Thank you so much for your talk. I think there's always this thought of like there's no separation between the artist and what we make, right? And I think what you do is so important, because the more specific you are, the more universal, the more that the messages that we have can transmit. And so often in digital art, these conversations around mental health are missing. And what you and Florian both talk about is also this like process, like delving into the process and seeing where it goes. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a Q&A. Y'all gotta get better at this. Maybe it's a joint panel conversation at the end. Maybe that's the format for today. So I want to, can we give one more round of applause to Victoria, please?
Thank you.
And for those in the room, we have like 10 minutes to like mix and mingle and get something to drink. And then we'll have our last speaker, Norman Wasmuth, back here at 10 p.m. And for our online audience, come back in 10 minutes.
Oi, ну ладно.
Yeah, it's 20 to 20. Hello, hello, and we are back from our very popular social break, speed break in this case. And we're here with our third speaker. Last but not least is Norman Wasmuth, a computational designer. And after we've seen so much from the academic world, I assume Norman is going to give us some insight in the artistic and professional application of TouchDesigner and show some of his projects. But maybe I'm also wrong.
No, you're right.
Great, I'm right. So a warm welcome for Norman Wasmuth, computational designer, and now our next speaker. Thank you, Norman.
Thanks for having me. Hi everybody. As Stefan pointed out, I will show a little bit from my work in kind of like the professional level. And in the first bit, I will run through some of my previous works to just scope a little bit where I'm active in. And then afterwards, I will dive into two projects where I'm talking a little bit further about the processes that are in these projects and how I use TouchDesigner in there. So everything is a little bit through the lens of TouchDesigner today. But anyways, a little bit to myself. I do interaction and interface design. I quite often call myself a software agnostic because I don't really like to define or let the software define what I'm doing. I'd rather start with the idea and the concept, and then depending on this, I have to decide what route to go or what else to learn. I kind of originally started in the club scene, first as a DJ, later as a VJ, and kind of this sparked this idea of pursuing essentially this route and for arts and design. I was always quite intrigued about spaces, let it be physical or digital. I always found it very interesting to come up with a story, digital storytelling, basically. Data visualization is a big part what I like to do. And over the course of the time, I gradually expanded basically my knowledge in programming within certain software building tools to essentially just achieve the things I had in my mind. And speaking of, showing you now a few of my previous works, and starting with a couple of exhibitions. I will pretty much run through these because A, they're old, B, I've seen them 100 times, and no, just kidding. So anyways, for instance, first one, don't really want to talk too much about it, but basically it's for the Science Museum in London, an exhibition that kind of gave an introduction to jobs of technicians to a younger audience, so they would kind of start certain actions that a real technician would do, and it's kind of all in this interactive digital physical hybrid setup. I also did the Micropia, it's called. It's a microbe zoo in Amsterdam. It's a whole exhibition in there with multiple digital interactive exhibits, and you can interact with it. It's kind of storytelling, and it's a little bit information or edutainment parts. Also more in the general future versions we could live in. I was also involved in the exhibition for the Futurium in Berlin. Also there, a bunch of interactive experiences, and also going underwater in Denmark for a research institution called Fjord and Belt, where you could go through an underwater tunnel and basically also get some knowledge about the scene where you are and how certain animals are living there, and also having live animals swimming around and you can watch them. These are kind of the exhibitions or snapshot of them. I also do interactive pieces. Now I'm talking a little bit more about the smaller scope of interactives. So for instance, for the Manchester International Festival, there was an intervention of a certain app where you could explore AR features within the city, around the building, and it was always with some artists together to kind of like transform certain experiences into this space. Or also exhibition-based interactive, where you could just bring your phone or a tablet and basically have a specific personalized experience for yourself, also telling you, of course, about certain facts of the exhibition, but also doing, for instance, this entire thing for retail, to have essentially like a sales assistant feature where you can like be in a store and you have like your personal experience, and then sales assistant can actually talk to you. But also kind of experimental setups. This was kind of the first prototype, or like the proof of concept for Journey, which became then later an online experience platform where you could, for the commercial sector, basically present certain products, or it's basically a replacement for fair trades, no trade fairs this way around. So basically digital fair trade fairs. And yeah, this was one of these projects where basically it was server-based rendering and you could just like run through the world. As I pointed out before, I'm really interested in spaces. So of course I wanted to also do something there. Sometimes it just stays in the concept phase and it never like progresses from there, even though some clients are really enthusiastic about it and be like, yeah, let's do this. But then, oh, we don't have the money and everything, or it's maybe a little bit too crazy, or whatever reasons. But sometimes things do come through, and then it's very nice to essentially do these spatial experiences a little bit more. In this case, it was just a projection mapping on the Bauhaus building, but also then, again, in a slightly smaller setting, to experiment essentially with lights, surfaces, and basically physically moving things. And this can then also go quite big suddenly, which is then, in this case, Changi Airport, where then, like, I think it's 16 of these peta clouds are hanging and moving around. And this is kind of like already the bridge a little bit to the artworks I wanted to talk about, where sometimes there are commissioned artworks and sometimes there are free artworks. In this case, it's in Shanghai for a cultural center where we did like a massive LED wall, and we were commissioned to do some digital artworks. And we were inspired essentially by architectural structures in Shanghai. We used certain geolocations and then generated these structures, and then we animated them for daytime with lights and shadows, and then also during night times, where we were mimicking basically like this neon signs or like artificial lighting of a city. But also in smaller scales, of course, to commissions for museums or galleries. In this case, it's the Prague National Gallery, where I did with a friend this little interactive piece, which is basically just a hand, but inside there are a bunch of lights and there's sound, and it's reacting to you when you're approaching it or when you do something. But also sometimes just doing little experiments that then going on display later on in some galleries, like in this case, where we did a projection and then a little device, and when you looked through the projection, you could look into each color channel, and each color channel had a topic, like red politics, green lifestyle, and blue porn. And then we had certain headline claims that are also consisting out of 3 words, and then 3 of these in each of the channels. And then they are animating through, and basically in your head, because you're primed through the media, you come up with very obscure combinations of words, and it's actually quite funny. But these are all old, so whatever. I also wanted to talk about the workflow, and especially about TouchDesigner. And as I said before, I'm a little bit software agnostic, so I'm not necessarily always putting TouchDesigner at the forefront, but it somehow always sneaks in. So there are these direct and indirect approaches, I would call them. And the first one, I would say, is one of these indirect approaches, where I'm actually trying to solve challenges that I don't know how to approach at this very moment, but I just like bring them into Touch world and then try to figure it out. And then from there, I copy it back to where I actually need it. So in this case, it was together with a studio I work with quite often, and we had like this self-initiated research project in which we were thinking about like, hey, could we actually teach an AI how to sculpt? And then of course we went through all these like questions, like what do we need to do, like to sculpt actually, and a range of questions is just a subset, even though. But there was definitely at some point this moment where, okay, if we do this, what do we want from it? And what do we want to achieve with it? And basically then, how do we approach it? So we kind of formed the team around it to solve these kind of things. And of course, first we need to teach an algorithm, starting basically on the 2D space, to make it a little bit easier to have something move around within confinements, and then trying to mimic basically always the shape you see on the left. And then on the right, tries to get there. Then over time, of course, this is just pixel-based, but a sculpture is using tools, so we added some tools to it, and of course the tools can also be rotated. So you had to kind of like tinker around there a little bit. That was done by Mark Tenzen, which was brilliant. Like he was like really diving into this. And basically coming from the 2D later, we just brought it into the 3D world to essentially have something moving and sculpting, in this case, a sphere. And over time, this process got better and better. And but we knew, like, I mean, the previous visual was not really pretty. And we also thought, like, we cannot really approach, or we cannot reach the standard we wanted to have in this setup. So basically, we took all the data that was spit out, and then formatting them, and we decided to bring it into a system. So that was kind of like a big part that I did to like make everything run, and also to allow design experimentation in there. The first thing is basically bringing the data in, and then over the time to build essentially a system around it that allowed a couple of things. But it's also kind of weird. Hang on, like this is not TouchDesigner. So this is, I would say, like is it kind of a sibling, or is it the divorce? I don't know what's happening. I don't know. So it's basically in Houdini, but because there are certain similarities to it, it is actually really nice to just go into TouchDesigner at some point when you face an issue, and then like super tiny sketches, basically, just doing something, seeing the outcome. That's how I could do it. That's a good way. And then just copying it over and trying to rebuild basically this approach in Houdini. And this basically happened throughout the entire process. Like every time I had a certain challenge, which was especially data-based, that happened through this pipeline. Obviously, the design part happened in Houdini. But yeah, essentially we had also an agent that is running around and is basically sculpting the entire thing for us. And the agent also sees something. So basically the agent moves through this weird grid you see on the right. And we also thought like maybe it's quite nice to visualize this so that people can see that it's thinking, but obviously it's also really abstract and it's not really easy to understand. But it looks nice. But anyhow, coming back to this one question, like why would we do this actually, was it's quite interesting to do a version of a sculpture like very quickly. So instead of like really doing hundreds of them, you could just calculate 100 of them. And basically that's what we wanted to do. So we did this parametric approach where we essentially do certain limitations. In this case, for instance, actions. So we give a finite number of actions that we allow the agent to do. And then we also define how many tools and what shape of the tools and this kind of thing. And by this, by having different parameters to it, so let's say if you draw a face with like 10 lines or 10 strokes, or you can paint a face with 100 strokes or 1,000 pencil strokes, the granularity will be significantly different. And that's basically what we try to achieve here by just having loads and loads of rounds of sculpting or trying to reach a sculpture that we kind of like wanted to have. And so yeah, there's a lot of variety basically there. The other thing is, of course, cool, now we have like these animations, we have the training data. It would be also kind of cool to understand what is happening and why it is happening. Of course, yeah, we had the animation, we had our data set. Data set is a little bit abstract. So just designing it a little bit differently, making it dependent on time, and basically then can also start overlaying essentially each of them to frame essentially each sculpture that is being produced. And yeah, and then also, of course, displaying the data to showcase basically in the final product. The other thing I was talking about was, of course, the parametric rules for the tools. So quite often now you saw a sphere, which is kind of nice because it's symmetrical, just about position, not so much about the rotation and everything. And it always it has this very specific look. But it's also really interesting to use simply different tools. And of course, there we also did a bunch of tests, essentially just different shapes, taking something away. And the results are actually quite nice to have a nice variety of like different surfaces, basically. And this, you can then see has quite an impact on the sculptures that are coming out in the end. And yeah, it's also then being presented in a certain way. One of the biggest things, of course, after all this, like setting it up, having the tools, moving them around, is feature development. Like, what else can we do? And of course, it's also like it's the biggest risk to get lost in like all these options, because like endless. You can just sit down and imagine so many different versions you can do. And especially in this case, TouchDesigner came back into the game quite a lot to, again, having certain patches to like do experiments very quickly to get certain outcomes that I desired, and then basically taking these approaches, bringing them back into the main pipeline, and essentially doing some experimentation on the design side again to make it the visual more pleasing. And yes, and then there are, for instance, heat maps, how we call them, like how often an agent comes to a certain point or a certain area, where you can then also see like how it is refining certain areas basically of the sculpture. And then of course, at some point there was then also the thing like, yeah, but then when we have this, we could also simulate certain things. So, and then basically, again, doing the style exploration, but also we could also do simulations of physics to make it a little bit more natural, which then also translates into the later things where we can actually really have chunks breaking off. And then, of course, another option for the rabbit hole is basically like combining certain agents together to let them build bigger sculptures, more variety, and yes, and by this also reaching a higher fidelity basically, because everything is voxel based, and the calculations and the simulations are getting actually quite quickly out of hand. But just leaving you on a cliffhanger here, I would suggest like go there and check the final result, and also, yeah, you get some further background information on there. Brings me then to the second project I wanted to talk about. This is more in the artwork world. So it's basically the artist Annie Frost Nicholson was reaching out to create something together, and basically it is a project about personalized experience dealing with mental health. So we knew, because of this framework or of these limitations, we needed a safe space basically for people to go. But it also should have like a low entry barrier and should be easy to interact with. We wanted to detect the moods of the people, but we just wanted to mirror the mood back and do not try to like change anything. But of course, dealing with mental health issues or like in general mental health, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just something bad. It can be also happy things. But for people who maybe are a little bit sad and triggered, there's of course some information about assistance in the city. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, speaking of city. So it was actually for the Design Week in London. So that's when I went live. And it just came back to Berlin this week, I think 2 days ago or something. So it was on display there for such a long time. And then now it's going to be displayed in Berlin. So if anyone of you wants to see it live, it's going to be there. Some of the limitations, or not limitations, more requirements, was it has to be standing in public. So it's offline, it has to withstand weather, and and again, it should be a safe space for visitors, where they can essentially do, tell confessions, juicy secrets, or like happy thoughts or sad thoughts. The input, just using essentially text via UI. And the output, we wanted to use sounds, a tailored sound and then tailored animation for lights on LEDs. I'm not really going over the entire design process, but these are early sketches essentially of this booth where the safe space would be. And essentially from the inside, we knew we needed some light sources like LED panels where some text is, an input, and so on. And then building this entire system, I knew like, okay, I need the text input, I want to detect the moods, and then I want to drive like a multiple multi-channel tracks to form essentially a sound composition that is then being sent out to the speakers. But I wanted to also use the moods or the detection of the moods and the multi-channel soundtrack to create the light animation. And then, of course, I wanted to have a little preview to like see what I'm doing. Yeah, what else to do is to be done, like LED mapping, like when I'm addressing these LEDs. I needed to have everything ready for the output for ArtNet, sending it to a microcontroller, and the microcontroller then sending it to the LED panels and the, for front of view and also the ambient light LEDs. Yeah, with all the soldering, cabling, and all this caboozle, which is so much fun. However, we also wanted to log these little confessions. So, yeah. And basically, this diagram you just saw is how it looks like at the top level in TouchDesigner. It's basically exactly the same you just saw. Brings us to the mood detection, how to do this. So basically, you can kind of have human emotions and moods on these valence and arousal diagrams, for instance. There are different models, but this one is actually quite straightforward because you have two axes on which you can have values, and then of course you have these sections where you can then parametrically define where somebody is, like on the mood spectrum. As I said, I need a UI where you can like text, like put in your text, and basically after you entered your text, hit enter. I detect essentially what mood you are, and then I'm getting these, for instance, mapped onto sad, angry, happy, fearful, or surprised. Like I get different values that are being detected in this text, and then I'm using these values basically to then do the sound mixing, which then looks something like this. And like a little bit closer to it, there are certain events, of course, like it's when the text has been entered and certain rules, the moment when this starts. Everything is kind of being set from these 3 blocks here. And then the sound is being like generated. Then the sound in return, like, is also then driving the light animation, which then looks a little bit like this. It's getting a little bit more complex. And this is kind of like the weighting animation, basically, but I'm slicing it up to have it spatially then on each of these panels and into the room. So basically in the room, it kind of forms the shape again, but of course there are gaps. And then I'm also piping in the text. I'm mirroring the entered text, but also, of course, there's certain text that is kind of animating you to interact. And from there, of course, like all this information has to then go through this LED mapping process, use these panels, and they have like this snaking behavior. So basically, I had to bring this information into linear information for then sending it out via DMX. This happens here to just go over the channels and basically taking the information, rearranging it, like in this case, like from rows to columns, then taking every second column, flipping it around, then really reinserting it back, making a long line out of it, transferring it back into RGB, and then sending it out to the DMX/ArtNet, which is kind of chopping it up, then all this information into several universes again, that then can be sent out via the microcontroller directly to the LEDs. This is kind of like standard things. So you just have to keep an eye on the amount of how many samples you actually have per channel or per universe, basically. And then all this thing, putting it just on location. And this is how it looked like. Yeah, so it's this booth. We have like this translucent foil over it, and the inside we kind of like went for a little bit of a retro future look. This is also Annie, the main artist behind it. And yeah, so just some more impressions of the interior and how the LEDs kind of worked. We also later mirrored these LEDs, so the moment they're off, it's a mirror. When they're light, you see the information. And of course, because of the translucency, there's also this effect of like having always a different appearance from the outside. And when you're inside, you have like these animations on there that are basically personalized for yourself, and you have your specific sound that was generated for you. Maybe some name dropping. So Annie Frost Nicholson was the lead artist. Then there was K67 Berlin, which took care of the booth and the interior. Khan Bulak, the sound tracks, and yeah, I did the LED system stuff. So to answer Stefan's question from before, I quite often just say I'm doing interactive spatial experiences. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Norman. Now I finally have a bit more an idea of what you actually do, and quite impressive. I have to say.
Sitting together in one space. Cool.
Yeah, it's really nice. And I also feel like, even though that wasn't planned, there seems to be kind of a thread going through this evening, from
nice.
Process to emotion, and yeah, I'm quite happy about that. And I also am quite happy about Hashini's proposal that because we didn't have time to have Q&A for the individual presenters, so I would just ask everybody on stage, and we can do the Q&A together. Which also puts the difficult question to the audience that they kind of have to address one person, two person, or all three together. That's kind of up to you now. And we need one microphone. Do we have?
We can have this one.
One microphone for the audience, and you guys have two.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, now all we need is some questions. There is a question, Lucan. And this reminds me, and Christian also has reminded me, that we have to thank Lucan, because Lucan is actually the only supporter ticket for tonight. Thank you, Lucan. And also thank you to Burg Halle and to Derivative and for supporting us. But Lucan, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Stefan. So I have a question for Florian. Florian, your talk was about that not finished patches are also some finished artwork, and all that kind. And I just want to ask, you worked first in the film industry, and there is like this so there's this common sense that things that artworks have to be finished. And did you bang your head against borders with these people who said, "Oh no, your art always has to be finished," and then you went to a different kind of thing and started with this interactive stuff, or how was it back then?
Yeah, it was roughly like this, yes. So I started at the film school, and it was super good and nice, and I did thousands of films and projects, also not only films, but radio plays or sound installations to the end. And then I found out that that film will always, or like these linear formats, film, television, etc., that's always like, you know, you sit for 60 or 90 minutes, the audience can't interact. It's always like 16 to 9. It's in the square. You can't move around. You can't change much as a viewer, and that's perfectly fine. But it's it's
like it's a paradigm change you experienced in your career, I guess.
A bit,
and this
yes.
is a big thing you wanted to point out.
Yeah, it came through.
Very interesting. I just want to point it out.
Right,
This was very interesting. Thank you.
Right. Also, I have my talking time used up, so I could tell you about it 10 minutes, but I know I shouldn't.
No, we're good. We're beyond time pressure now.
I have a question to Norman. May I? Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And I was curious, what was the reaction of the people? There were actual audience who visited the booth, right? So how did they feel? And actually, they talked to AI, or what? Who was asking the question and who was on the other end? And how did they feel about expressing themselves inside of it? And how was the feeling afterwards? And how did you also collect the feedback from them, if you did?
There's plenty of questions. So just to recap, so there is no interview situation in there. You're just invited to express yourself, or like just type in what's on your mind right now. This is, it's not, I mean, it's an algorithm, but it's not really AI. It's not one of these large language models. We sometimes joked it's kind of norm intelligence. So it's just something hacked together. But actually using AI for it, so basically like in language, essentially I went to AI, said, look, can you give me like 200 words that are associated with like the human emotion of anger, and then give me like a weighting between 0 and 1. How strong this is an indicator for this mood. So that's how it is kind of like, based on this, it kind of like works like this. And then of course, certain combinations between them, that's then where something called like the natural language toolkit comes into place. So this is this. Coming to the feedback of the people, that was, I mean, I wasn't really there all the time. So I was there in the beginning when we set everything up. And so there were a couple of people really interested in trying it out, even though when we were still setting everything up and the cables were dangling out, and then they were like, hey, can I try it? And I was like, yeah, maybe you come back tomorrow. But in general, it was quite interesting because, I mean, people liked it. So the few I saw, I would actually say our user 0 was actually one of the security guys there who was actually really interested in it. And he's lucky that's the moment when I turned off the logging. So it was actually interesting because for me, it was when the people typed something in and I saw the general animation of the lights and the sound to it, I actually knew in what kind of state they are. So that's a little bit, it's a little bit mean. But the thing is, I wasn't really there. I was not really monitoring. So that's also the only combination how someone could actually break the anonymity barrier there. But basically, especially this guy sitting in there, he had a very, very sad, like really on the lowest end of the sad spectrum. And then after his turn was over, he stayed in there for a few more minutes, and we started to become a little bit worried about it because it was like, oh shit, what's going on? And then the door opened and he was like just grinning over his entire face. I was like, this is so cool. And we were like, oh my God, we thought you were killing yourself. But I know it was quite interesting. In general, also having read some of these juicy secrets or confessions, you can definitely see a certain progression over the course of the day, like what time it is. So you kind of can, I mean, after school, you know, like that's probably some pupils are in there, and that's when the quality becomes a little bit ridiculous in there. But there is always a slice in the day when it actually feels really earnest. And some of these confessions are actually really, I mean, they are sometimes dark, but they're also really happy ones. But the most important and interesting thing about it is that they are so relatable. Like everything that is being said there, like either you feel it yourself or you felt it yourself or you know someone who's feeling like this. This is actually also the reason why we wanted to log it, because this project continues and now goes exactly in this direction, to actually showcase that maybe you feel a little bit alone or maybe ashamed or whatnot. It is absolutely relatable. Everybody has the same feelings, but that's coming in the future now. That's what we're working on right now. So a little spoiler there. And I think that's answering all your questions, right?
Thank you.
Eine Frage stellen, die nicht ganz tief hat jetzt. Okay. Yeah, in English, of course. So my question is not that deep in the technical part. It's more about like thanks for the stuff, and it was like a huge kind of variety of projects. And for me, it's kind of interesting to see, why did you start? When was the point where you were like, oh, I definitely want to know the difference between chops and sops and tops, and like, what was the moment where you've been like, I'm so fascinated about the program TouchDesigner that I need to dig deeper in the stuff. So like, for kind of the question goes for each of you. So yeah, when and why did you start using TouchDesigner?
Okay, I start. I mean, basically, during my studies, I wanted to always do interactive things. And then I started to look into solutions, how to achieve this. I started with processing back then, when it was in beta phase or alpha phase even. I reached the limits of it quite quickly, and also because it was not really performant on any machine. So I kind of turned my back on it fairly quickly. Then I discovered VVVV, did some experiments in there, hated the interface, sorry. And also the approach of like, I mean, I don't know if it's still like this. I think in VL they changed the rendering, but back then you always had to decide between DirectX and something else. So, and then certain nodes were just working in certain render pipelines. So it was quite confusing for me at some point, and I didn't really like working with it. So, and then looking further, I think I saw some screenshots at some point of TouchDesigner, and I would say like probably something. I think the Amon Tobin show at some point came out, and that was quite intriguing. And basically, I looked at it, and it was more structured for me. Like I knew where something is, not like in VVVV, and yeah, I stuck with it. I think I started with the dots somehow. I don't know why, but that was the entry for me in certain ways to just handle certain data. And yeah, I don't know. And then over time, essentially like another idea, new approach, need to learn something more. How can I do it here? How can I do it there? That's it.
Okay. I can. Yes. So first I was, as I mentioned, I learned Hydra. At that time I didn't know about TouchDesigner yet, or maybe I've just heard the name, but I wasn't so into media art. I mean, I still could adore it, but I didn't know in which program it was made. And in 2020, I just, when I came to Germany and started studying, I took the seminar Live Coding and Shaders, and that's where I learned Hydra, and I enjoyed creating visuals. And I met a good friend of mine there who, when he saw how well I like creating visuals, he told me that I definitely have to check out TouchDesigner. And I had it on mind. I didn't check it out right away, but at some point I started. And when I came to Bauhaus, I took some seminars in it. And yeah, also thanks to social media, you just see way more works in it and how diverse the results can be. So it wasn't like my artistic choice, it was more about like that I want to have a greater toolkit in the future. I still find it very overwhelming, but I step over this fear and still try to work with it, and the results I really enjoy.
Yeah, so in my case, it was, maybe like you, I started with the processing and text-based stuff, and at some point changed over to VVVV, and I did this for 2 or 3 years, and then changing to TouchDesigner was actually because I was was teaching in VVVV to students, and I love the interface, at least the old one, because it's a blank page. Yeah, and at some point I thought maybe it's easier for students because there's more pre-visualizations and more these little images of what happens in which node. This might be easier, so I switched my class basically to TouchDesigner and tried that on the students, and I had the feeling it's maybe 30% easier, and then I stayed there. I don't know, and maybe it has changed by now. I don't know.
There is another question.
Maybe one thing to add, which I really appreciated in TouchDesigner, was that basically along the chain, you always see what is happening to what you're doing, instead of like piping everything together and then you get an outcome and you ask yourself like, why does it look like this? That was definitely really helpful.
Yeah. But I don't know if it's, I don't know how it's before now. If there's more preview.
Me neither. Harshini?
Anybody?
We actually have a V4 meetup running at the same time.
could ask them.
We should have done a crossover.
No.
I have a question for Norman. Which environment did you use for training your sculpture agent? And also, if you did I understand correct that you used TouchDesigner to communicate with Houdini, or it was like separate stages?
So trained, it's in the ML agent in Unity, and then getting the data out there. The relation between TouchDesigner and Houdini was not direct. It was more using TouchDesigner as a familiar tool to figure out how to do certain things. Like essentially, I can't really remember, but for instance, with this heat map thing, to kind of get a visual representation of the data itself already without like simulating anything, and like just getting my bearings straight. And of course, all of these applications have like this classic 3D application axis modeling. So X, Y, Z is not always the same. So you suddenly had information that you expected to be of a certain format and it was not. So, and then all the results you got were just crap. So going back into TouchDesigner to figure out what's going on, that was always this process. It was basically every time I encountered something where I got stuck, I just took the challenge to touch, tried it there, and then maybe when I found a solution there, trying to replicate the solution in Houdini. But it's not one-to-one, that's the problem. Like the certain nodes are called the same, but they're not doing the same thing. But yeah, it's basically reading a lot of documentation for two applications.
Maybe I can pitch in with a simple and stupid question. Florian, you showed this wall, this mapped out wall.
Yeah.
How did you do the masks?
Say again, how?
When you showed this projection on the wall, the stone wall, how did you create that map? Was it handwork?
It was asked before. It was basically, sorry. It was very manual in a way. It was like a lot of photographs of the wall put into one stitched wide image. Somebody else did the photos, if I remember right. And then it was just like 2 intensive days of InDesign drawing a line around every stone. And then you had an SVG graphic, and this could then you could get it into V4 and get the SVG is like a big XML file, and you can get every shape and the center point out of it manually. So, and then the center point I would use to pixel pick from the video image, like what's at that point in the image, get the color, and fill it to the whole shape, and then that gets projected.
Yeah, I asked myself the same question. And another question for Norman. What was the tasks you couldn't do in Touch that brought you to Houdini, or have you answered that before?
No, I haven't. But basically, the rendering itself, the quality of the rendering was the thing in the beginning. Also, we knew we don't really need it in real time, as the ML agent didn't really provide in real time either. So the rendering, simulation, that's it. So.
Can I add one sentence, Stefan? Because maybe you were pointing at the same thing. I liked a lot in your talk how you said that when things are too hard to understand in Houdini, that you would go to Touch to understand the logic of the data or the axis and how this is arranged. So somehow it's a tool for understanding, I think. Yes, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but also I would say there's a tool for understanding in the project you spoke about, like more understanding inside things. And yeah, I like this a lot.
It's the understand designer, not the touch designer. Do we have any more questions? Or should we call it a day and discuss over beer?
Yeah, thank you for everything. I have a question for Norman. When did you start from your studying into, yeah, okay, let's build a company and do like digital service for the museums and stuff? And yeah, what was the way you were going out to people and say, hey, we can do it, or go to artists and say, hey, let's collaborate together and make something and make money from it?
I think there are multiple different ways. Of course, when you do like a larger exhibition, that's not. I mean, it's all the things is always a team. Sometimes the team is large, sometimes the team is very small. But for instance, these exhibitions, you have to be like at a certain size and show certain experience in doing these kind of things, because museums usually don't really want to use public money on something where uncertainty is. So they really want to be certain. So basically filling up a portfolio in this field. So I started at a company as a computational designer where we did these kind of things. So there was someone in there from the business development getting these kind of invitations for public tender, for instance, and then we came in, presented an idea. Maybe sometimes we won, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we won and didn't get the thing, however. I mean, so I was there for almost 5 years, and now I'm freelance. So over the time, of course, I met a couple of people, like for instance, at an event like this. It's pretty good to actually use these breaks to really talk to people, getting to know each other. And yeah, basically then, yeah, sometimes just, sometimes you're just somewhere, you're just talking about what you have done recently. And then there's the question, oh, are you available then now? And it's like, oh, okay, come on, we have something. And yeah, this is, at least in my case, this is how it works. And then every now and then, suddenly there's an email coming or like a phone call and be like, hey, I have a crazy idea. Do you want to team up? I was like, yeah. But I hope this answers your question. I don't really have a definitive answer. It's kind of this thing about it. And maybe I have a question to you. Yes. I mean, when you talked about your experience essentially in interacting with this piece you just created, did you ever try it on somebody else, or did somebody else try it and you got some feedback there, or?
Not yet. It's actually a good idea, but I haven't yet done it for also a practical reason, because it's still like difficult to set up. So I can interact with it, but it's not at the stage where I want to invite people to interact with it. And second, also artistically, I still feel it more personal. So it might be not in my research interest to know how others feel inside of it. I would still be interested in, and I want to make meetings, like sessions where there is an audience, so they will be inside, but they will be more, as you probably said, like as an audience in theater, like more just watching kind of passively, but maybe having their own thoughts and interacting more mentally than physically. In a bigger dome, because I have it planned also at least a couple of rehearsals in Jena Planetarium, so on a bigger scale. I imagine it more interactive, but I will have to check how it will be there, like physically when I'm there, because then I could imagine it more like also inviting audience to interact and like taking camera and like being it more together instead of them just watching me. But it's the next step. Yeah, for now it's still my like one-on-one with the dome and technology thing. Yeah.
Big space for you.
I have a question to Victoria, and thank you again for your really personal view of your work and your feelings. It's really touched my feelings, my heart, like a touch designer thing. I feel it really fits. And yeah, I'm kind of curious because in this work and feeling, you created like kind of a way of of a style, maybe also with these feelings, and you like presented your feelings, really personal feelings, but also kind of in front of a camera. So I think it's really, I really have a lot of respect to this self-confidence to show this and to tell people about this. And I also saw a picture of you like doing live visuals. Also, you were doing it for a party festival. And how do you feel there when you like standing in front of the crowd? And do you still using your way of doing visuals or your style in this, or does it feel different and you work different in your style? Or I'm just curious about this way.
I like this question. Thank you, Tony. Actually, it's very different because what I recently discovered for me, when I'm VJing, I'm in my like vacuum, because I would say I'm more of an introverted kind of a person, and I feel really drained when I have to interact a lot socially. And at a party, it's an interesting place to be a VJ because you can interact without actually speaking to anyone. So I really love it, and I respect people who come up to talk with me when I VJ, but I prefer not to. And I really am in my own like bubble then, and I can stand like that. I once like VJ'd for 12 hours without drinking. It was sober, so it was an amazing experience, and I felt like close connection with the audience without needing to talk. And with this project that I'm making now, it's a completely different feeling. And I feel also nervous about first sessions where I will invite at least like 1-2 people to be there to witness it, because then I will be more exposed. I wouldn't have to speak again, but it will be more like mentally naked, so to say. And I don't know yet how I will be feeling there because I never tried, but these videos and tryouts in the dome are still easier for me, and I like interacting with the technology when I'm alone with it and in my mind, and I think I will try to still create this wall and at least at the beginning, try to not think about the audience being there watching me. And then it might be easier for me to still just focus on my feelings and interaction with the visual and the technology. But it's, again, an open question. Yeah, VJing, I really enjoy for being in this bubble, that's for sure.
I think we're hitting the 11 to 23 o'clock mark, and maybe it's time to finish this on stream and go to a more private setting. So thank you all for coming and for sharing with us this very wide range of touch designer applications and creative expression. Thank you for coming and for joining us. Thank you, Christian, for putting all of this into the World Wide Web to our thousands and thousands of viewers out there. Thank you, Greg and Isabel, for watching, and everybody on the stream. And I think it's time to announce the next TouchDesigner Roundtable is actually venture even further, and we're going to be in Turin in Italy on the 21st of February. You're all invited to join us there. We have interesting speakers, and there's going to be 2 workshops adjacent to that. One is going to come from Nima Ghazistani, who's also conducting our beginners course, and the other one is coming from me, and I'm going to talk about data visualization. All of that is going to be hosted by RKH Studio and by Gamma Music Institute in Turin. And with this, thank you all, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bitte? Oh, see you at the bar. Stop being sober.